Hello, John. Nice to see you. It seems like a long time since I've seen you. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. How are you? You doing all right?
Not too bad. We're looking forward to jumping into this being our first one.
Absolutely.
To explore the real Doctor Who universe. That'll be good. as opposed to Docky Who, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and looking forward to everyone joining us on Celestial Chronicles, where we're going to go from Doctor Who all the way from the beginning with the Unearthly Child today, all the way up to present day, and it's just going to be a fun ride enjoying these adventures. So join me and Paul for this. You know, we're going to have a blast, aren't we?
We are indeed. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. And people have probably seen in the chat that I've been part cyber converted at the moment with the headset. So just pray for me.
Yeah, well, we're all halfway there, aren't we? Really, just about.
Yeah.
If you've seen Age of Steel with all the phone things, we're all a bit like that, aren't we? But that's exactly the story for another time. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I said, we're going to talk about the Unearthly Child, and just getting your first thoughts on it. What do you think about this episode? What is it you particularly love? Is there anything that you don't like particularly about it? Just take me through your thoughts.
Well, if you're going to go back to talking about the pilot first, and then talk about the comparisons between the two of them, I think, and overall in terms of Unearthly Child in general, I think it gets a lot of, certainly the latter episodes get a lot of hate because of the cavemen and all that kind of stuff. But I love all that. But we'll get more to that later. But the pilot's interesting. Having watched it recently, it is much darker than the first episode.
Definitely.
Much more sinister. Everything is really loud. When they enter the TARDIS, it's like the sound effects have been cranked up, really loud. The interior TARDIS noise is like, whoa, really loud,
absolutely.
My favourite bit, which I really wish it continued over with it, was the TARDIS doors. That entrance with Barbara, we see the police box doors and the proper TARDIS doors are great.
Yeah, it is great. Really nice. I do love that. And I think you're right, and we'll talk about how much darker the pilot is in a minute. I think for me, the thing that I always love about it, I always love that shot in Totter's yard, where you see the pan and seeing the TARDIS for the first time, and then they pull back. Yeah. And you really get a look at the TARDIS, and for the first time you hear that fantastic noise of the TARDIS. Just saying to you, this is something different. It's alive, and
it's also that lovely thing though that they've never done since. Was the keeping the theme going for like a couple of minutes into the actual episode, which really sets up the atmosphere, because the original theme is superb. Yeah, and with the pilot, which I do like about the pilot, is the fantastic thunderclap they have at the start of the titles. Which they did a similar thing on the colorization of the Daleks, the boom of the TARDIS taking off as the TARDIS line, which is a nice homage to that. Yeah, but the thunderclap is great. I remember reading somewhere that Ron Grainer loved thunderclaps, and I think he uses them in the titles for The Prisoner, I think, as well. So they've got that kind of going on, which sounds great, But
it's great, and I think also sort of talking about the darker Doctor as well. I mean, that pilot is, you do see that it's a Doctor that is very dismissive of them the second he sees them, and there's something dangerous about him in that pilot episode, isn't there? Where this is, and I know in the actual broadcast episode you kind of see that, potentially this is somebody who will do what he has to do to survive, in that episode, where
it's funny. I actually think if they'd met the Master, he would have treated them better, because the Doctors, even when in the actual episode, the broadcast one, he's still quite nasty, to be fair.
Oh yeah,
even though they've watered him down, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
in the pilot he's really evil, but he's still quite mean in the actual broadcast episode. So I have to laugh. If they met the Master, he'd be much kinder, at least more polite to them, at least to start off with, But
exactly. and I absolutely love Ian in this. I think Ian leads the charge in this story, doesn't he? And it's quite an interesting one, because it's predominantly Ian a lot more that's pushing to save the day. It's not the Doctor as such, because for a lot of it the Doctor's dismissive, isn't he? He doesn't want to help anyone. He just wants to get away.
Well, the Doctor is so selfish in the first. In fact, up until about sort of Marco Polo, but he starts to warm a bit after that, after the Age of Destruction experience, all that kind of stuff. But he's still quite mean, even by get to Marco Polo and stuff. But that's the thing. He just wants to get away or get his own way, effectively. He does the Daleks with a fluid link and all that kind of stuff. So he's like a spoiled child, but he's brilliant. I love Hartnell in this.
It's great. It is great.
Yeah.
And I think for me, when, what was it, end of last year, when Ncuti Gatwa came out and he said, the one thing the Doctor's always been, he's been about love. No, he hasn't. Because you see this Doctor in this episode, when he's got that rock in his hand, he knows, he's calculating it, and he's thinking, but right.
To be fair, he was trying to get the caveman Zar to draw his way back to the TARDIS. To be fair,
Of course he was. Of course he was. Yeah, of course he was. Yeah. What are you doing with that shotgun, Doctor? I'm going to fire a flare. Oh, right. Okay. Of course you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he's very cunning in it. He's quite selfish, which I actually really like, because he does. There is kind of fan sort of speculation that it was the companions that shaped him as it went on, which I kind of partly agree with. I think it probably always was there, but he just took time to come round to that thought, that idea, because he's an alien. It's that Tom Baker thing as well, but he's not a human being.
No, he thinks differently.
Hartnell made that very, very clear at the start. Definitely. I know they couldn't sustain that, the entire of his whole run, and he does develop as a character. But I love that slightly sinister, what is he going to do next kind of thing, which works really, really well, and it makes it a bit more exciting, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I do like the fact that he's testing them as well early on, and the facial expressions that Hartnell gives are great to the camera. He's so good, and he was perfectly cast for the role. But Ian and Barbara are great in it as well. Without those two, it wouldn't be what it was. It just, they really do put in a fantastic performance here. It's just, and just jumping back to talking about the Doctor as well. It came over to the broadcast episode, but he still shocks Ian on the console.
Yeah.
We've not seen any other Doctor do that.
Well,
today,
to be fair, he does that and then kidnaps them. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, there's a lot going on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to be fair, Ian and Barbara were stalking Susan, so they've got a lot to answer for as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. The police officer would have a lot to say about that.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah. If he's still wandering about trying to check all the locks and stuff like we were doing earlier.
Yeah, but and then when you get, further on and you get to the cave and whatnot, I just, it's quite the broadcast episode. I mean, the fight scene, for who's going to be leader, that's quite dark as well. They really go at it, don't they? And you see the terror on, Susan's face as she's seeing these two battle to the death right in front of them for the first time. And, it's really well done, but they just wouldn't do that now.
No, I think it is. And this is something I always bang on about. I think when Doctor Who works really well, it's really credibly played. And the cavemen actors, Jeremy Young and Derek Newark, and all the rest of them, are really playing it really straight with some really difficult dialogue to make believable. Yeah. But it's really gritty, dirty, horrible, kind of atmosphere for the cavemen and the cavewomen. It's all kind of, it's quite realistic, I think, considering. I know they can't. I don't want to get boring about sort of historical detail, whatever, but they're trying to do this as a convention. You know what I mean? Because it's in real life there'd be grunting and there'd be no dialogue. Because it's a TV program, you have to suspend disbelief and make that work. You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly. So it's great, and I think you're right. And I think also you have the shot of the, I think it's very effective where you've got the flame in the skull. And they put them up to, pretend that they've died by fire to get out. But that is very well done, I think, for the time. It's a great production.
Well, some of the cavemen dialogue as well. That particular bit when Zah picks up the flaming torch and says, "With fire, it is day." I mean, it's quite profound. You know what I mean? And then off they go. And it's that kind of on the spot chase they do is brilliant.
Yeah, it's great.
Here's a branch in your face, and there they go. But it works really well though, and that set, it was at Lime Grove, looks brilliant. And actually the cliffhanger for part 3, I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but the cliffhanger for part 3, when there's the TARDIS and all the cavemen kind of can't stand up and go, right, we've got you. That is brilliant. That's such a scary moment. But
it is great. And for the first time, at the end of it, jumping forward as well, at the end of the episodes, right at the end where they get back to the TARDIS and you're talking to them about, they're talking about dematerializing, because at that time when the spears are being thrown, we haven't been told it's indestructible at that point. We don't know that, so that's very well done as well. But it was also a story where they didn't leave, as friends with people at the end of it. They were running for their lives. These people that they had helped were trying to kill them. So it's great. Perfect.
I was going to say the aspect of the differences between the two episodes, particularly the pilot and first episode, is interesting. That Caroline Ford gets to play it much more kooky, much more crazy, which I think works really, really well, because it makes it again more alien. And she only really got a chance later on in the Centrite to be a bit more, have telepathy, all that kind of stuff. And poor Caroline Ford wanted to do it more like that, which is a shame, because it is quite weird when she does that drawing with the ink, and then folds the paper, that Rorschach drawing, and then opens it up, and it's the console and stuff. That's fabulous. It
is. It's very, very good. And I thought I've always liked, the cut scenes where they're talking about how on one side she's a genius, and on the other side that she gets things completely wrong. And I think that's played and cut really well, where they do the bits with the science experiments, and she's almost critiquing it before it started, and she's talking about the decimal system, and people are the kids around her are laughing at her. I think that's very well done to kind of set that tone. That
I think the only one criticism I have about that scene is that the laughter from the kids is all ha 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 ha. It's a bit kind of like staged. But the ideas sound. I agree with that. That works really well with the her being a bit of a genius, but she doesn't know everything. She's got gaps in her knowledge, which is a really clever way of she's only been here, what I think they say, is it 6 months? Been the happiest of her life, she says.
6 months, yeah, exactly.
So they've not made for a long time, and I don't know what her history was like of Earth before that, other than the fact she knows that the Doctor's favourite period is the French Revolution, which is a bit, that makes perfect sense for the Hartnell Doctor being a bit bloodthirsty, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly right. and I mean, where do you sit on the pilot compared to the broadcast version, where the pilot, obviously Susan talks about she was born in the 49th century, as your title suggests.
I always like to, when I review stories, to have a little bit of a heading there, or a quote or something, to show that I've done the research. But it's bizarre. I think I kind of agree with Sidney Newman. I think it's a bit like, I don't want to bring in New Who too much, but when you tell too much about the Doctor, it loses the Doctor Who thing, you know what I mean? So the Who thing. So I think it's probably too much information. When they cut that back and they made it less specific about where they were from and what time they were from, it worked so much better. I don't think it gives it does make Susan a bit. It helps with the strangeness, but I think it just tells you too much. I think,
Yeah, exactly. It's the mystery, isn't it, of the character. I think the broadcast version works so much better, which is great. The other thing I do love as well is I do love the initial dematerialization shot So you get like the city disappearing in that image.
I always thought that was television centre, because it's comes up like that.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what it looks like,
and for me, it's quite striking. Again, I've watched it how many times over the years, but it's almost like they play it as if the TARDIS traveling is quite a traumatic experience, because the Doctor and Susan you can see they're struggling with it, and then obviously it pans around to see Ian on the floor and Barbara on the chair. So whether the TARDIS and the Doctor adapt over time and they become familiar with each other, that potentially develops over time.
No, I agree. The fan speculation, I think, may have come from New Who, but the idea that the TARDIS could be piloted by 8 different pilots or something, it's quite a nice idea, I think.
Yeah.
The idea that the Doctor can't control the TARDIS makes more sense. It's very complicated for one person to pilot, and I think that works really, really well. But the idea of having the TARDIS uncontrollable is absolute genius, I have to say.
Yeah.
And I wish they stuck more to that, because the TARDIS now is only controllable depending on the script. You know what I mean? It's kind of a bit like that.
Exactly, and I mean, when you see the latest Doctor Who trailer, and it grinds my gears by the fact that this TARDIS can now go into Unit HQ and crash into it, when the whole beauty of this thing is that it can materialize and dematerialize. Now I think in New Who that they are sometimes trying to do things which makes it almost like a generic spaceship. Whereas the beauty of it, as you say, is the fact that this was so good, and kids at the time would have been the same, that they would have been like, well, we don't know where Doctor Who's going to be next week. We have no idea. The Doctor doesn't know where we're going to be. And I love that whole arc of, Ian and Barbara. They want to get home, but they can't get home. Now in New Who, you're right. Suddenly you can do a short hop, like a few meters away, and there's no issue with it. Whereas, the first Doctor, and for several Doctors onwards, you couldn't do that. If you tried to do a short hop to somebody else, you'd end up on the moon or somewhere else in a different time.
Well, that's the thing. Later on, when they chase, when they leave Vicky behind and things like that, that's quite worrying, because they're not going to get back to her and rescue her, which is... obviously there's more coincidence in that with the Dalek spaceship and all that kind of stuff. But the idea they can leave someone behind, is brilliant, and I think that's or you can't get back works really well, because it adds to the drama and the tension of the story, and what's brilliant there, I think.
Yeah, like I said, because now, if you were going to leave them there now, there would be no consequence to it, because you'd be like, oh right, okay, well, we'll just pop back and get them. Where it works so well in this, in this first Doctor era. But again, the TARDIS, when you see that TARDIS interior for the first time, I mean, call me biased, I'm a big fan of the Fifth Doctor's TARDIS interior, but that first console and that first TARDIS interior, that wins, doesn't it? It's so special, it's so striking when you first see it.
Well, I wish that I'd seen Doctor Who on the original broadcast, because to have that initial, oh my God, it's bigger on the inside moment, because I don't think, even I was watching as a kid in the Pertwee era or in the Tom Baker era, that I think I just accepted it. You know what I mean? That was Sci-Fi. It's fine. But it never had been really done before, so to see that for the first time ever, would have been amazing. You know what I mean? And gobsmacking, I think, for the audience. Because it's a fantastic idea.
Oh, it's great, and I also like the fact in the story where they build up that TARDIS, because they're trying to get in there. So you've got this police box, and it must have been building up for kids watching, going, well, what's in there then? What's in there? And you also have the bit where Ian walks around it. Almost kind of going, well, this thing's alive. What it's and talking about the noise it's making, but he goes round it, but then it just builds to that moment where they force themselves in the doors, and then you see all of that, and it's I never get tired of that scene. It's just perfect.
No, it's great, and like I said, I wish they kept the entrance from the pilot in the broadcast version, because that was very clever. and really well done for the time, considering the budget and the limitations of the special effects at the time. I think that's a great practical effect that works really, really well.
Yeah, and I wonder, in an alternate reality, whether if they'd gone with that pilot version and that darker Doctor, whether it would have been as successful. And that's an interesting thought, because I don't know. I mean, obviously that they went with darker Doctors in New Who, didn't they?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not sure whether people would have stuck with it as much if he was that dark.
Well, I remember an interview with Jonathan Harris, who's in Lost in Space, playing Dr. Smith, and he said a similar thing. In the pilot version of that, he's really quite villainous.
Yeah,
and then he turns it to a comic villain, and he said there's that same thing, that it wouldn't sustain the audience's interest if you're out and out villain all the time, which is true, because it's too much.
Yeah,
but I think Hartnell gets that balance. So, like we said, he has that. They make him more mellow, but he's still got a element of being selfish and a little bit, a little bit mean. But he's not as nasty as he is in the pilot. I mean, I love him in the pilot. I think he plays it really weirdly.
Oh, he does.
And even it's really bizarre, because in the pilot he's not got his Victorian costume. He's like the Master. He's got like a black suit on, black tie. He looks like a normal person, which I'm a very Victorian garb myself. I like that. That's iconic.
Yeah, I
this is really
do.
Weird. That kind of it looks really odd and on him with a suit and a tie. It's like when you see the Antonelli Master in Planet of Fire.
Yeah,
it looks like Roger Delgado, and that's weird. But it's interesting seeing that difference and why they made him more Victorian instead, because I love that idea that the Doctor likes certain clothes and he wears what he wants to wear. And it's like getting back to New Who again, the trailer for Shooty, but he's in different costumes. That doesn't work for me.
No,
the Doctor needs to have an identity, and it needs to really work. And Hartnell's Victorian costume worked. He did change hats, cloaks, jackets,
exactly,
all the time.
But you're right.
But he needs that identity. But I love the idea as well. Hartnell very rarely, a couple of times he does, to be fair, like the Romans and the Reign of Terror and Crusade, he wears a period costume. But generally, he keeps the costume on. I love the fact Tom does it a lot. You wander into a situation, you're wearing these clothes from a different time. It looks brilliant. It's juxtaposition stuff, but it's really, really well. And I like the idea of the Doctor, just like Eccleston says in The Unquiet Dead, I changed my T-shirt. Is that not enough?
Exactly.
I like that. That's that kind of idea. The Doctor just, you own the place.
Exactly right. And I think jumping into sort of like the New Who, from someone myself who's hair impaired, I'm amazed
I'm
how
saying nothing, John. I'm saying nothing. I've no idea what you're talking about. I haven't got a clue. I can't relate to that at all. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm amazed at how he can grow his hair so quickly for a particular episode, because I want to know. I want to find out that secret, because if I can, I will. But
we'll be first two people signing up for this online if there's a
exactly,
queue.
Yeah.
I've got used to not having any here, I have to say. But
Celestial Chronicles sponsored by L'Oreal.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, Vidal Sassoon or something like that. Yeah. Other hairstylists and shampoos are available. That's right.
Yeah. And I also like, when they're in the cave, they get taken to the cave for the first time, and you see the first Doctor, and for me, when the knife is to his throat, and you'd see genuine fear in his face, on his face, that.
The fact he realizes he's lost his matches.
Yes.
That look on his face is oh God, I'm in trouble now. It's like,
and
Hartnell is really good at doing that kind of little detail with his eyes and stuff, and he's acting for cameras brilliant. He works really well.
He's so good, and we wouldn't be where we are without him. Without him just putting this role in. But the way, like you say, that there's still in the broadcast episode that terror of, is he going to let them out? In those first few TARDIS scenes, is he going to let them go? And then you can see it. You start seeing him thinking it through, and he thinks, well, if I let them go, we're going to have police, everyone around this thing come morning, So
and he's going to be like E.T. He'll be in a tank being experimented on, kind of thing.
That's it.
Being probed.
Yeah. That'll be an adult show at that point.
That's Doctor Who Torchwood 1964 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. but it's totally.
I was going to say the interesting thing that's about Hartnell's kind of performance in the pilot and the first episode. I'm sure they must have been working on this, the telepathy thing. There's a bit where I don't know if it's a timing because it was under rehearsed or not. But there's a bit where at the end when he decides that they're leaving in the pilot, and it's almost like she's read his mind. Yeah. And then he goes to the console and takes off because the moment there's like, no, and she's realized what he's going to do. So whether it's just instinct or telepathy, it works like like telepathy a little bit to me. It's like I think connected. You're right. It's interesting, but they don't do the similar thing in the original the broadcast version. That's slightly different.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's a lovely little scene where even early on, the chemistry between them is very well done, and they build on that. And I think over the next few stories, it just really fleshes it out, doesn't it? But and then obviously after the story, as you get back, and then you're set up for the following story, which is just iconic. It's great.
I love the fact they do link all the stories together through. That's great, and you don't know when the next adventure is going to start or finish, kind of thing, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
But the early, I was going to say this earlier on, I forgot, the early part of the story, certainly more for part 2, when they give you little hints about in part 1 and part 2 about the Doctor and the TARDIS and stuff like that. One of my favourite bits is part 2, where they're telling the audience and the companions about the TARDIS, how it functions and stuff, and they talk about it changing shape. It's been an analytic column and it's a Dan chair, all that kind of stuff. And then Hart looked at a little bit to camera. Why hasn't it changed? Dear me, how very disturbing. All that stuff is brilliant.
Yeah,
because it adds to the tension of it and also gives you a lovely hint about, without being mansplaining it to the audience and going, this is how the TARDIS works. You don't have to do that. It's kind of like it's done by
throwaway line.
In the dialogue and the plot kind of thing, which is much more subtle.
Yeah, and again, you kind of think, well, what periods have they been to already that they've stayed in for a short period of time before they've had to move on, when clearly it was working at that point, and now we've got this story where it's saying, oh, it's not working, so it's only just happened because obviously it was a police box and it's locked into that image now, which is in that form,
And again, that's a brilliant conceit, isn't it? That whether it was a definite, we'll make it a police box because it's a great iconic image, or it's cheaper, let's go with that. Either way, it's a great iconic. Every time I see the TARDIS now, the TARDIS is iconic. Even in Scotland, if you go to Glasgow, they've got real police boxes there. When I see it, I get that frisson of Doctor Who.
Exactly.
Which is fabulous, But
it's great. And do you know what? I talk about iconic images that I absolutely adore. Is the end of the first episode where you see the shadow and the silhouette of the caveman, and you've just got the TARDIS in the background. As you're getting the titles coming on, it's great, isn't it? You can't beat that.
Well, well done. It's funny. It's that idea of the TARDIS landing on a different planet, and that I love the desert set for 100,000 years BC, wherever it's meant to be. Whatever you want to call it. But the that kind of odd thing with a police box on a sandy beach or a desert, whatever. It's really weird, but it works really well.
Yeah, definitely. And I just. I don't know how many times I've watched this over the years. Like you, it's just a regular thing. Probably each year I go back to it.
Well, I do. A friend of mine always watches episode 1 on the anniversary, and I sometimes do it, depending if I'm working or not. If I can do it, he does it. Try to do exactly the same time it was broadcast. I'm not that OCD about it, but I do try to watch on the day if I can. When did you first see it? Have you got memories of when you first seen the pilot or the story itself?
Do you know what? It would have been for me probably would have been late 80s.
Right.
Because that was when Dad obviously was working at the BBC, and at the time he had connections who had it, so they got me a VHS copy of it, and I just that was on a loop. It was so good. I loved it. I'd got into it, the videos with. Obviously, I'd watched Davison because that was my first Doctor, but I'd got into, the first VHSs, as I've said before, was Robots of Death and Death to the Daleks, which I loved. Yeah. But then, at the time, I know people say about, would kids watch a black and white story now? But it didn't even register for me back then. I was just like, it's a Doctor Who episode, I'm going to put it on,
I think not watching black and white stuff's a new thing. Right? That when we were growing up, I know I'm slightly older than you, but I think there was a time where it was okay to watch both, and then all of a sudden it was just black and white was rubbish. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's that our age or growing up when we were in the 80s or the 70s, whenever, it was fine to watch. I used to watch. My uncle got me into the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy when I was younger, and I love all that kind of thing. And there's an amazing amount of black and white
it's great
around a TV show which are worth watching regardless of the fact they're in black and white,
Yeah, and for me there's still something quite magical about black and white. I don't know, so just the way it looks and the way it's presented, I could slip away in the evening just watching a black and white Doctor Who for the whole evening, and just be an absolute bliss because it's that good, and it's quite interesting that over all the years I've gone back and watched again and again and again black and white Doctor Who compared to New Who, because I think the writing and the stories are so much better that I never get tired of them.
It's interesting. People often say that Doctor Who constantly changes, and it does. And I think that the newer iteration of it, I think, has lost the essence of what Doctor Who was for me personally. Again, that's subjective, so I'm not going to New Who bash, but I think in terms of Doctor Who changing, I think Hartnell era is very different from the Troughton era, and so on and so on. You know what I mean? But it's still Doctor Who. You know what I mean? And that's the important thing. And it still contains that essence that I like about it. But I actually saw Unearthly Child in the Five Faces in 81. And that I mean, I was already hooked on Doctor Who prior to that, but that really got me into it massively. And I was unfortunate that I missed the first tiny wee bit, the opening bit of Unearthly Child on that broadcast in November, because I was doing my paper round and I missed the beginning of it. So I was rushing round trying to get it done really quickly, but I've just missed the beginning of it. And at that point, we didn't have a video recorder, so I had to wait for ages to see the actual rest of part one. So that was I missed. I loved the opening shot of the TARDIS and all that, and the policeman. I missed all that. I think I got in just as we were going into the soft focus, and then the school arrives and all that kind of stuff. And I was like,
And my first introduction to the first Doctor in the 80s was the Target novelizations. Because my parents and my grandparents used to get them for me, and I always remember for the first time, that it was the iconic Daleks cover with Hartnell on the front of it, and I was like, who is this? And then I went back and I read it, and I was like, oh, this is Doctor Who, and next thing you know, a few years later, I've got access to watching them. They're just great.
Well, unfortunately, at the time of the Five Faces, that was the time we got the October special about the archives being decimated. So I'd read the novels as well, the Doctor and the Daleks and things like that, and was aware of Hartnell because I had seen the Three Doctors originally, so I was aware briefly of that, and I'd seen Who's Doctor Who broadcast originally and things like that, so I've seen little snippets. And my family were into Doctor Who; they got me into it, so I was But it's kind of they love sci-fi as well, so they used to tell me about Hartnell and Troughton, and my mum told me once about them watching Evil of the Daleks and telling me about Dizzy Daleks, and I was jealous as hell. So they'd seen them, so that kind of thing. So I had the Monster book and the Radio Times special and things like that. So I was aware of Hartnell a little bit, so I didn't see all that much until the 80s anyway, because I was a member of a local group, and they were able to get access to. So in 1980, I saw part 1 of The Chase and part 1 of The Faceless Ones before The Five Faces, which was fantastic. I love The Chase. That's another story for another time. But
yeah, I mean, I got quite lucky at the time, because when my dad was working at the BBC, he had a friend he worked with who had a connection within BBC Worldwide, and he had a connection with somebody who was in the archives. So this friend of my dad's, this guy used to do recordings on VHS of all the stories that are in the archives. So I was watching a lot of them before they ever got released on VHS to people.
Well,
so
I had a similar experience through the local group. I got copies of it because people, you would show some stuff, then you speak to people and go, I've got this, do you want to swap that for that? And all that kind of stuff. And I got there's a sort of guy who did them, and you could swap episodes. And I managed to get, I may have been through TARDIS or some kind of fanzine, and I managed to get a contact to swap. And I got stuff like that in the 80s that all probably came from the same source you got them from. But and it went around, depending how lucky you were, depending how good the quality was. Because then you got, I remember Web Planet was like wobbled all the time, and the titles were kind of run on a gramophone because they kept going dum dum dum, looking at it like that kind of thing. And it drove the picture really bad, and the background hiss would be awful. But you watched it because like, this is Doctor Who. I've ruined my eyesight now, but this is Doctor Who. Fantastic, yeah.
I mean, again, it's people don't realise that back then in the early 80s, that was like almost like that was worse than a large drug deal going on in the UK. Getting your VHS copies of Doctor Who, that was a big thing. But I mean, with regards to the Unearthly Child, is it up there in your like say your top 10? Is it one that you regularly go back to, or is it one that you kind of you'll watch it and you'll go, oh yeah, it's good, but it's not in my top 10? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a quite a tough one, because I think
I had to throw a tough one at you, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. I find it really hard to do top 10s because they keep changing every time I watch them. I've really enjoyed that, I'm watching season 15 just now on the box set and loving it. And some of it, I'm just finished The Sunmakers, which wasn't a massive favourite of mine before, which I really enjoyed this time round. I don't know if it's sometimes you have to be really in the mood to capture that story, whatever you're watching.
I agree.
So sometimes you can be in the wrong mood and you don't like it, but it's not anything to do with the story. It's just how you're feeling, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So
I agree.
But Unearthly Child's a funny one, because I get a bit annoyed when people say the first episode's brilliant, but the rest is crap, which I don't think is true.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
But I think as a beginning story, it's really, really good. It's really strong performances. It's a story I do come back to when I'm watching, if I do a marathon or something, or let's do let's watch some Hartnell first series or something like that kind of thing and do that. It's probably not my top 10. Part 1 probably is. Part 1's probably one of my most favourite episodes, but the rest of it I really, really enjoy. I don't feel like as soon as we get to end of part 1, I switch it off and not watch the rest of it. I never do that. I watch the entire thing. But I think it's got a lot going for it, and it's a bit easily dismissed. Cave of Skulls, Forrester Fee and the Firemaker. I think they are kind of dismissed a lot, and I think that's really unfair. So I wouldn't say it's in my top 10, but it's definitely a favourite, and I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah,
and I think it's good. It's only a 4-parter. I think that sustains its length.
I think you're right. I think for me, it's not in my top 10, but just for doing what it needed to do to set the stage for, what would come. It's a great story, and I'm the same as you. Yes, the first episode's great, but I love the following episodes as well for Unearthly Child, because I love the little character developments. I love the little things that Hartnell does in those episodes. I love how Ian takes charge of a lot of it as well. There's things that if you turn off straight at the end of episode 1, you miss all of that.
Oh yeah,
and it's great, and that like you were saying a few minutes ago, that links on into future stories, doesn't it? It's great.
And he does. There's lots of. I mean, it's funny as well. I think it depends. I think it's probably quite dismissive to say Doctor Who 60s Doctor Who's quite slow. It's a different. You have to get a different mindset for it. If you watch enough of it, you can get to that mindset. I think for a modern audience, it might be tough, but you can get. If you have an open mind about it, you can get into the right zone for it. Because I was brought up with older TV. I prefer older TV to new TV.
Yeah, same.
So I kind of I'd rather watch something from the 60s or 70s than watch something from now. To be fair, but that's just me. Maybe I'm just odd. I don't know. Maybe. But it's kind of well, you and me both then. Yeah. But it's we're both odd. That's fine. But the thing is it's entertaining for me still. Even things like the long, like I love Marco Polo, I love the Daleks. You know, sometimes when it's a longer story, I quite enjoy that because there's room for development. It's not like rushed, and there's lots of characters. Sometimes occasionally, an odd story might be better if it was a 6-part rather than a 7-part or a 4-part rather than 6. But it's still incredible TV. And it's still amazing me that they made such good TV in the limited resources they had and the time they had, because effectively making Doctor Who, I know it wasn't live, but it's filmed as live. And poor William Hartnell has a really hard time for fluffing his lines all the time. But any actor who's going to have to work an entire year and he's carrying most of the show. I know that William Russell helped because he was the main kind of figure that drove a lot of it, but Hartnell kind of was the brains of it, kind of that the Doctor was kind of idea. So it's shared between 4 of them. But he was still, imagine. It's like doing a soap and there's only 4 characters in it. You know, it's kind of like you couldn't sustain that if you were David Tennant's age. You know what I mean? And perfect health. It's a real challenging role for any actor to do. I think Hartnell is fantastic in it. He doesn't get enough praise as far as I'm concerned. But
I think you're right. And you know, with New Who and the new productions, and I constantly hear about and I've heard lately that about we need to bring Disney in because of the production and whatnot. For me, that's just a nonsense at the end of the day, because I mean, me and you privately have talked about it before, but you can have the biggest budget. You could have Amazon giving you unlimited resources, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good. It's all about the scripts and the people producing it. So, otherwise you just get what you've got the last few years. You get a bit of flashbang wallop and then you don't get any substance to it. Whereas these people and these actors were doing it on a shoestring, but the stories were engaging, the acting was spot on. So, we wouldn't be here where we are today without all of the love and all of the passion that these people put into it. And, I'm just glad, I'm lucky that I got to live through these times and I get to see it, because, there could have been a time where we wouldn't have seen it. It would have been wiped potentially, we don't know. So, and I'll shout out to Mr. Levine there as well, because he was somebody who saved a lot of episodes. So, thank you to him, because that was my childhood, and I'll never get bored of it. I'm still just a big child enjoying these stories. Never get tired of it.
So am I. I mean, I love 60s Doctor Who particularly, and maybe as part of it is the fact I wasn't around to watch it originally. I caught up with it, which is great to be able to do that with what's left.
Yeah,
but I'm a massive fan of the audios as well, the BBC Collection audios, because I've listened to
same.
I can't tell you many times I've listened to Marco Polo. I could probably tell you many times I've watched Unearthly Child, to be honest, which is loads. So I know it very, very well, and all of the audios I've listened to, and sometimes I prefer to listen to the audios than watch the animations, to be honest, but that's another story. But it's kind of, it is interesting because it still engages you, even though it's just a soundtrack, particularly Marco Polo, but we'll talk about that later down the line. But it's still really engaging for me as a fan. Definitely. And the performances are great, so I adore 60s Who, probably because it's shrouded in mystery a little, because stuff is missing, and you have to, there are photographic references for a lot of it, some telesnaps for some of it, but it's still quite mysterious. Maybe that's why I like it. It's got an aura of you don't know everything. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. It's fantastic, But
it's great, and and again, when I was growing up, I only got to see a handful of Chuck Troughton, and I remember, we'll get to it as well, but I remember being so excited when Tomb of the Cybermen was found, and that was it. I was round to a friend's, and we put it on as soon as we got it, and it was great. But just wonderful things, and I'll never get tired of Unearthly Child. It's classic, great Doctor Who. I would probably say I'd say a 7 out of 10. I would say it kind of it ticks the relevant boxes, and it sets the show off in the right direction and engages an audience. So yeah, about a 7, I would say. What about you?
I'd probably give it about 7 or 8, something like that, because I think it's a really strong story, and it does, like you say, it sets up the series beautifully. And because it's the caveman thing about it, I think is, people may think it's a bit generic, going back to prehistoric times. It's a bit unoriginal, but what it does is it kind of focuses on the peril of the companions and the Doctor, and it's about them rather than about the cavemen, if you know what I mean. It's more about how they develop as characters and how they. It's a first exploration together as for the audience as well. So it's more about them than about the situation, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? But,
and again, there's that scene with Barbara where the caveman's attacked, and just the terror on her face, and what she's witnessing. She becomes more steely as she goes on, but that just, I think her mind's still trying to get to terms with the fact this is all actually happening as well. So she's just living in this constant terror.
Well, that's the thing. Her terror is brilliant, because if this is a real situation and you were put in this situation as a human being, thrown into this, that you've got cavemen want to kill you, and there's a saber-toothed tiger wandering about, whatever, and all that kind of stuff going on, and it's like, and you're in an environment where you don't know what's going to happen. I think her level of terror is appropriate, because wouldn't you be?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think this is where sort of New Who lets it down now, because New Who, they would have the companion do some sort of flippant joke or something like that in that situation. Whereas you're right, if that was you in that situation, you would be in that absolute terror. And for me, I'd be trying to find the tallest tree possible and climb it.
Climb up the top and stay up there, The thing about it is as well, Barbara, because of that, the way she plays it, people think that's quite weak, but it's not, because she's a very strong character anyway.
Yeah.
She's very, you just see it when she's in her own environment in the school. She's very prim and proper, and she knows her stuff, and she's quite strict. And then later on in the series, she shows her metal, like in the Aztecs and stuff like that. So she's really kind of a really strong character, and I dismissed the idea that she's just a frivolous 60s woman, which is not the case at all.
No,
I think.
Not at all. And she's, I think she tries to be diplomatic, and she tries to put her points across without, being particularly aggressive. So there's a difference there between that and being, like you say, a typical 60s casting of a woman, whereby I'll just stand there and scream, because she is not that character at all.
That's Susan's job.
Yeah, it is. But no, I mean, that's our first review underway. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I look forward to you joining me and Paul as we go forward, just on to the next one, which is going to be an absolute cracker, isn't it?
So can I just check, we're doing the black and white version, aren't we?
We are definitely doing the black and white version. Yeah, that's it.
Other versions are available, but not on this channel.
That's it. That's it. We are not going anywhere near that colour version.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. But no, that's it, everyone. And see you on the next one. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.